back then today with another updated levelling guide for patch 1.1 for Last Epoch. For today's video, we'll show off one of the quickest and easiest ways to level the Paladin Mastery from levels 1 to 80. The build that we will be using here, it uses Flame Burst, Smite and Warpath. Very easy to run build, very quick to get through the stages, and it requires 0 skill swaps as well. Now before we do dive in, if the video is helpful, please do take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. But let's go in, let's start breaking all this down. We start off here with a quick general progression infographic, and as mentioned with this setup, there's 0 skill swaps, so it really is nice and easy. Level 2 you'll want to use Warpath as your main spender. Level 4 you'll spec into Warpath. You can add lunge to your bar as well. Not as vital to do this anymore now that we have evade with patch 1.1, but it's useful to have that as an extra movement ability, and we do have space on our bar for it. At level 15 you'll spec into Smite, and you'll be using Warpath to proc that, so you'll spin around the stages and you'll be firing off Smite all over the screen. At round about level 16 you'll choose the Paladin Mastery. At level 20 you can spec into either Javelin for single target damage or Holy Aura for AoE damage. It's down to you which one you go for at this point. At level 35 you'll spec into whatever of the 2 skills above that you didn't actually choose, so you now spec into that, so you'll have them both spec'd, so that's Javelin and Holy Aura. When you have 15 points in your Mastery, you want to place Sigils of Hope onto your bar, and then at level 50 you want to spec into Sigils of Hope. So that's the progression. Let's now talk about priority stats and gear you want to keep an eye out for. For this next section here, we'll run over useful levelling gear you want to keep an eye out for, and we've got some new additions with patch 1.1, and also based on feedback from previous videos we'll have a quick breakdown of priority stats that help out this build as well. In regards to priority stats for this setup, although we are using Warpath the majority of the time, that will be used to proc both Flame Burst and Smite, and they scale off spell damage and fire damage, so you look for that wherever you can get it. Defensive stat wise, we are using a shield here, so block and block effectiveness can be great, flat health can be great, and movement speed is always nice for sipping through the stages. We start off with the weapon slot for the gear then. We have the Firestarter's Torch, equipable at level 1. It's a common drop. What's so good about this in Warpath is it applies Spreading Flames, and at early level the scaling on this means it does a ton of damage. You can just use your Warpath to go through enemies, it will set them on fire, it will set other nearby enemies on fire, and you just continue and the enemies will all get taken out. This is actually so good for this build that I would say hold off running this leveling setup until you get one of these. So it is a level 1 drop, it is a common drop, so it's either very easy to farm or it'll be very easy to buy it on one of your other characters from the bazaar. The next unique we have here is one that, to be honest, the Firestarter's Torch would be much better than it, but it was added with patch 1.1 and it does make use of Smites. That's why I was wanting to add it to this video as an option, but if you have a choice between the two, without a doubt the Firestarter's Torch will be better than this. But this is Paladin's Sacred Light, and the reason we're using it, as you can see, there's a chance to cast Smite on melee hit. Once you reach level 60 in this build, you'll want to swap to a Crystal Wand, the reason being that it's got a huge amount of flat spell damage on it, and these will really bump your numbers up for both Smite and Flame Burst as well. For the shield slot here, we would use the Cradle of the Raised. This is just far and wide one of the best shields in the game. It's equipable from level 18, with it being a Weaver's Will item. What you see on screen here as well, you will be adding additional modifiers to it as well, so it only gets better than what you can see on screen, and what you can see on screen at the moment is actually pretty nice as well. For the helmet slot here, we have the Calamity, equipable at level 7. This will give you a boost to both your spell damage and your fire damage, so that's perfect for this setup. We have 2 items here for the armour slot. We start off with the Kestrel. It doesn't provide much defence, but it's equipable at level 1 and it can give you a nice little boost in your movement speed. The next unique we have here is another low level one, but one that's really nice. It's the Prism Wraps, unlockable at level 5. These will give you increased elemental damage, increased critical strike chance, and you leech a portion of the elemental damage that you do as crits as well. For the ring slot, we have 3 options here now because we have a new one added with patch 1.1. Starting off, you've got the trusty Arboreal Circuit. Equipable at level 1, if you have 2 of these at max rolls, they give you an additional 36% movement speed. The next item we have here is the Sun Reef. These are equipable from level 18. You will be replacing these relatively quick, but early game if you have these, they can give you a nice little boost in your fire damage. Finishing up here, we have a new item with patch 1.1, so it's a Ryan's Sun Seal, equipable from level 27. The reason we would use these is they give you additional levels to Sigils of Hope, they increase the duration of it, they increase your armour and healing effectiveness, and finally every 10 seconds if you're above half mana, which you should be with this setup, you cast Sigils of Hope, only consuming between 70 to 80% of the mana cost. Normally Sigils of Hope we use a setup where you need to get kills in order to generate them, so this can be really nice if you're going up against a boss and there's no enemies to kill, so you can keep your sigils up. Another low level item here for the glove slot, but this does work nice, especially just for leveling. It's Avarice. With this particular one you will leech a portion of the elemental damage that you do. It gives you increased leech rate and it gives you elemental resistance as well. Two uniques here then for the boot slot. We have Flight of the Quetzeri, that's a new item with patch 1.1, equipable from level 14. It gives you an additional evade charge, it reduces the cooldown on evade as well, so you can use them more often, and when you use them you'll gain haste for a few seconds as well. We then have the Advent of the Erase, quite similar to the last item. This is equipable at level 16. It's another one that has haste on it. The difference with this, rather than using evade to get haste, you get a chance to get haste for 3 seconds when a nearby enemy is defeated. The final item we have here is Soulfire Relic. This is equipable at level 34. It's more geared towards an Acolyte style build, but it actually works with this one as well. We've got a chance to ignite on hit, we've got more spell damage to ignited enemies, we have a chance to ignite on hit with our fire skills, and also we get increased fire damage if we've killed an enemy recently, so this is really a great relic for us. For the idol slot here, we don't really have many modifiers at all. It's just the 2 idols that can work out nice for us. We have the Stout Idol, it can give us increased health as well as increased fire damage. We then have the Adorned Idol, the top modifier, chance to blind on spell hit. We actually do additional smite damage to enemies who are blinded, so this can work nice, and a chance to shred armour on melee hit, that will be via Warpath as well. Now before we finish up this section, quick infographic again just to show you the stat priority and the leveling gear that you want to keep an eye out for. But the next section we'll cover, this will be useful blessings. For the blessings here, we've seen a great change with patch 1.1. We will now have a blessing library, giving us much easier access to various different blessings. So I'll cover the timelines that offer stat bonuses. The ones you want to look out for in this build: Fall of the Outcast, you'll want experience. From the Black Sun, you want spell damage leech. End in the Storm would be increased health regen. Reign of the Dragons would be melee damage leech, crit avoidance, and all resistances. Any one of the 3 is great. And the Age of the Winter, you can get block chance and block effectiveness. And then Spirits of Fire, you want to go for shred fire resistance. So that's blessings to look out for. Let's go now and let's now break down the passive tree point allocation. For this section here, we use the awesome Last Epoch tools. I've got a link to the build planner in the description below, and it's got the order that we will actually allocate the points. So for this video, I'll just quickly run over the nodes and why we're using them. Starting off, Fearless gives you 5 vitality and increased health regen. 1 point into Stalwart gives you 3% flat block chance, really nice for 1 point. 5 points into Armour Clad gives you increased armour and 10% reduced damage taken from nearby enemies. And then 9 points into Relentless gives us increased flat damage as well. We then have the bulk of our points, of course, going into the Paladin tree. We have 8 points in Conviction, gives us increased fire damage and fire penetration. We have 5 points into Defiance, that gives us attunement and smite will scale from this, as well as elemental resistance. 1 point into Honour, that gives us a flat 2% block chance. We have 1 point going into Divine Bolt, so we'll fire these off. We've got 5 points going into Valour, it gives us increased health and increased health regen. 10 points into Heaven Fire, it gives us spell damage with a shield. A flat 30 is a real nice amount to get. We have 10 points into Prayer, so we have increased damage and healing effectiveness if we've healed ourselves or an ally recently, and we'll do that via Smite. So when you actually have that proccing, you gain 70% increased damage and 70% increased heal from it as well, so that's great. We have 8 points into Sanctuary Garden, so our armour when we have a shield is increased by 400, spell damage goes up by a flat 16. We have Shield Wall, so it removes any dodge we would potentially have, but it gives us 10 health on block as well as an additional 5 block chance, so we're really up on our block chance with this setup. We have 8 points into Faith Armour, it gives us increased armour and critical strike avoidance, a pretty nice 40%. 3 points into Reverence of Duality, gives us increased health, increased damage, increased healing effectiveness and increased mana. And then 12 points into Light of Rye, so this one gives us a whopping 96% increased fire damage and additional move speed, which is really nice as well. So let's go in now, let's start to break down the skills that we specialise in. The first specialised skill we have here is Warpath. We'll use this to proc both Smite and Flame Burst. With patch 1.1 the channeling cost went from 10 to 18, however we now generate mana whilst we're actually using it, so it really hasn't changed much at all when you take that into account. Looking at the point allocation here, we have 2 points into Unchained, 1 point into Reckless Spin, so in total that gives you a reduction of 10 mana cost on this. We have 3 points into Quicksilver Wind for an additional 30% move speed. 1 point into Gorebringer allows us 1 point into Earth Scorcher, so we're transforming Warpath's main damage from physical to fire. 5 points into Path of the Heavens, that gives us increased global spell damage, and then 4 points into Wind of Justice, so this means when we're spinning with Warpath we will cast Smite, and that's once every second. Our remaining points, I would put 1 point into Iron Reach to allow us to put 2 points into Juggernaut Stance, so when we're spinning with Warpath we get an additional 8% block chance and block effectiveness as well. We then have Smite next, and as mentioned we'll be using Warpath to proc this, so we have 3 points into Holy Fire. We put the 3 points in this because we want the full 5 points into Conflagration, so Smite will deal 100% more damage versus ignited enemies. The enemies should almost always be ignited. We have 1 point into Immolate, so it means once we drop the Firestarter's Torch then we still have a chance to apply Spreading Flames, which is really nice for trash mobs. 2 points into Blinding Flash, that allows us to place 1 point into Sacrifice, huge amount of additional damage, but when we actually use Smite we'll lose some of our health, so we don't want to put too many points into that. We have 1 point into Atonement, and then we've got 5 points into Conviction. This reduces the cast speed on Smite, but we're not directly casting it, so we don't get the negative side of this, but we do get the flat 10% base crit chance, which is amazing. And then our last 2 points go into Deep Impact, that gives us a crit multiplier of 50% for Smite. The next skill we have here is Holy Aura. It gives us some nice buffs, but we're using it mainly for Flame Burst, which is great for taking out trash mobs. So we have 2 points into Raya's Devotion. We've got 5 points into Burning Blows. It gives us increased global fire damage, so that's great for Smite and Flame Burst. We have 1 point into Flame Burst. Quite a long tooltip here, I won't read it all out, but essentially this allows you when you're doing melee attacks to proc Flame Burst. We then have Improved Flame Burst, so this increases the damage on it by 200%. And then we have Inner Flame, so it means you can actually use Flame Burst more often and the area of it will be larger as well. We have 2 points into Raya's Fury, so this gives you fire penetration, which is great. 3 points into Fanaticism, so it gives you increased attack speed, and then 1 point, which is just one of the points we had left there, into True Strike, that gives us increased crit chance. Our next skill here is Javelin. You'll use this on elites or bosses for some real nice single target damage via various instances of Smite raining down from the sky. So point allocation, 1 point into Mighty Delivery, 1 point into Burning Strength, most of the points here are to get along the tree, 1 point into Siege Barrage, 1 point into battle standard, so when we throw down our javelin it's a flag, and then in a moment that flag will actually call in smite as well, which is pretty amazing. But we have 4 points into ardent symbol, battle standard lasts longer, an additional 8 seconds. 1 point into divine intervention, you can see this is where your battle standard will now cast smite. 5 points into righteous descent, so smite will be cast more often and it's got a higher crit chance once again. 1 point into capture the flag, so if the enemy moves, the battle standard will actually move with them as well, so the smite will continue to hit them. And then the last 5 points go into banner of restoration, so you get health when you're in that range of the battle standard. The final specialised skill we have is Sigils of Hope. So with this one, we have 5 points into empowering sigils, that gives us 25% increased damage. We have 1 point into Last Wish, although the ring we looked at earlier on means that this possibly won't really be necessary, so it's down to you if you have the ring, if you choose to use this. But with this you've got a chance to summon a sigil when you kill an enemy, and it basically saves you from having to cast it, because if you have to cast it you have to stop using Warpath. I don't like to do that at all. But next we have Decree of Flame, so that's additional fire damage per active sigil. We have Iron Sigils, gives you increased endurance per active sigil. Enduring Hope, so sigils last longer, an additional 10 seconds. And then finally Tetragram, so this gives you an additional maximum sigil. So that is everything you need to know for levelling the Paladin Mastery from levels 1 to 18, patch 1.1 for Last Epoch in record time. There are other levelling guides on the channel, so if this has been helpful, feel free to check them out. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do take time to hit the like, share and subscribe button as well. But thanks for tuning in for this one. I'll see you all again soon.